In November of 2019, the city of St. Petersburg, known for its palaces, canals, and its legacy as Russia's cultural capital, was shaken by a story that seemed torn from the darkest pages of a crime novel. A respected professor, a man honored in France, admired by students, and seen by many as a living embodiment of Napoleonic history, was found stumbling drunk along the banks of the Moika River. He was soaked, shivering, disoriented, and carrying a backpack. The man was Oleg Sokolov, and inside his bag were human arms. Oleg Sokolov was born in 1956 in Leningrad, the city we now call St. Petersburg. From a young age, he was captivated by European history, and especially by Napoleon Bonaparte. To him, Napoleon was not just a historical figure, he was an obsession, almost a hero. Sokolov's academic career was shaped by this fascination. As he grew older, he became one of Russia's leading experts on Napoleonic history. His lectures at St. Petersburg State University were unlike anything else. He didn't just speak about battles, he reenacted them. He gestured, shouted, commanded the classroom like it was a battlefield. For many students, he was magnetic, a brilliant orator, a man who could make history come alive. But Sokolov's passion wasn't confined to the classroom. He was one of the most prominent figures in Russia's historical reenactment scene. He staged elaborate recreations of Napoleonic battles, complete with uniforms, cavalry, and cannons. He even took part personally, wearing the uniform of a French officer. His efforts brought him recognition beyond Russia. France awarded him the Legion of Honor, one of its highest distinctions. He was seen as a cultural ambassador, someone who bridged past and present. But behind this theatrical charisma was a man with a darker side. Students and colleagues would later describe a very different Sokolov: authoritarian, controlling, explosive. In fact, stories of his violence circulated long before 2019. In the early 2000s, one of his former partners accused him of beating her and threatening her with a hot iron. Another former student described how he locked her in his apartment and threatened her with weapons. These accounts were not anonymous whispers. Some even reached the university. But nothing happened. The complaints were dismissed or quietly buried. Sokolov's reputation, his connections, and his importance to the university seemed to outweigh the risks. He was too valuable, too celebrated. And so, he remained in his post, a man with a long shadow, shielded by his academic prestige. Years went by, and new generations of students entered his lecture halls, often unaware of the whispers surrounding him. One of those students was Anastasia Yashchenko. Born in southern Russia's Krasnodar region, Anastasia was bright, ambitious, and determined. She loved history, and her dream was to pursue an academic career. Friends described her as outspoken and confident, a young woman who wasn't afraid to challenge authority, even in the classroom. When she arrived in St. Petersburg for graduate studies, she quickly caught the attention of Oleg Sokolov. To him, she was not just a talented student, she was a kindred spirit, someone who shared his passion for history. Their relationship grew closer, moving from mentorship to romance. But the imbalance was obvious. He was in his 60s, she was in her 20s. He was her professor, her mentor, a man with influence. At first, the relationship seemed consensual, but as time went on, Anastasia confided in friends about Sokolov's jealousy, his controlling behavior, and his violent temper. He wanted her to be dependent, obedient, but Anastasia was strong-willed, and that independence sparked conflict. On the night of November 7th, 2019, tensions boiled over. The couple argued in Sokolov's apartment. According to investigators, the fight escalated into shouting, threats, and violence. At some point, Sokolov retrieved a sawed-off shotgun he kept in his home. In the early hours, he shot Anastasia 4 times. She died instantly. For most people, the story would end here. But what followed was even more horrifying. Sokolov kept her body in the apartment. Over the next 2 days, he dismembered it. His plan, investigators later concluded, was to dispose of the remains in the Moika River. On the morning of November 9th, he attempted to do just that. Carrying a heavy backpack filled with body parts, he staggered toward the water, but he was drunk. At the river's edge, he lost his balance and fell in. Passers-by saw the splash, rushed to help, and called for emergency services. When rescuers pulled him from the water and opened his bag, they discovered what was inside. Back at his apartment, police found the rest of Anastasia's remains, along with the murder weapon. Sokolov admitted to the crime, though he later tried to present it as an uncontrollable outburst, a so-called crime of passion. The case shocked Russia and made headlines around the world. How could a respected professor, honored abroad, turn out to be a murderer? In court, Sokolov wept. He claimed regret. He said he loved Anastasia, that jealousy had overcome him. He asked the court for leniency, saying he wanted to take care of his young children from another relationship after his release. But witnesses told a different story. Former students, colleagues, and partners came forward with testimony about his abusive behavior. They described a pattern of violence stretching back years. One witness even said, "Everyone knew what he was like. Everyone knew he was dangerous." The defense tried to argue diminished responsibility, suggesting emotional instability. But a psychiatric evaluation found him sane and fully aware of his actions. In December 2020, the court handed down its sentence, 12.5 years in a maximum security prison. For many, the punishment felt light, given the brutality of the crime. But under Russian law, it was the maximum sentence possible for murder committed in the heat of passion. For Anastasia's family, no sentence could bring her back. They remembered her as a young woman full of promise, with a passion for history and a future ahead of her. For the academic world, the case was a scandal. It raised uncomfortable questions. Why had the university ignored years of warnings? How many complaints had been silenced or dismissed? In Russia, the murder sparked broader debates about domestic violence and abuse of power. Many pointed to Sokolov's prestige and connections as reasons he escaped consequences for so long. His case became a symbol of how institutions protect powerful men at the expense of vulnerable women. Internationally, it was seen as a chilling story of obsession, abuse, and unchecked authority. Oleg Sokolov once lived for history. He built a career on Napoleon's battles, on stories of power and downfall. But in the end, his own name became a dark chapter of history, a man who betrayed his students, his profession, and the woman who trusted him.